Zainabu was a beautiful girl, but many people did not see it because of her dark skin. She lived with her father in a small but peaceful village. Her mother had passed away when she was very young, leaving her father to raise her alone. He loved her dearly, but he was often busy with work and did not always notice her struggles. After some years, her father decided to remarry. His new wife, Adana, was a woman who cared deeply about beauty, but to her, beauty meant having fair skin. She believed that only light-skinned girls were truly attractive and treated those with darker skin as if they were less important. When Adana moved into their home, she brought along her own daughter, Ifunanya, who was fair-skinned and pretty. From the very beginning, Adana favored Ifunanya, showering her with love and attention, while ignoring Zainabu. Zainabu hoped that Adana would love her like a real mother, but instead, she felt like an outsider in her own home. Every time Adana looked at her, there was a coldness in her eyes, and soon the hurtful words began. "Dark skin is unattractive," Adana would say. "If only you looked more like Ifunanya, you would be beautiful too." At first, Zainabu tried to ignore it, but deep inside, the words started to hurt. She couldn't understand why her stepmother treated her this way. Was it her fault that she was born with dark skin? Why did fair skin seem so important to Adana? No matter how much she wished for love and acceptance, it felt like she would never be enough in her stepmother's eyes. At first, Zainabu thought Adana just needed time to accept her, but as the days passed, it became clear that her stepmother did not like her. Adana never smiled at her, never spoke kindly to her, and never showed her any affection. Instead, she would sigh whenever she saw Zainabu and make cruel remarks about her dark skin. "You are too dark," Adana would say, shaking her head. "No matter what you wear, you will never look beautiful like Ifunanya." Zainabu would lower her head, pretending not to hear, but her heart ached. Why did her skin matter so much? Why couldn't Adana love her the way she loved Ifunanya? Ifunanya, with her fair skin and delicate features, was treated like a princess. Adana bought her the best clothes, the finest jewelry, and always made sure she had whatever she wanted. She praised her endlessly, calling her "my beautiful daughter" in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Zainabu received nothing but old, worn-out dresses and harsh words. Whenever Zainabu tried to join in conversations, Adana would ignore her or make her feel small. "Go and do something useful," she would say, waving her away. But Ifunanya could sit and chat for hours, laughing and enjoying her mother's attention. Zainabu felt like she was fading away in her own home. Her father, though loving, was too busy to notice. He believed Adana was simply strict, not realizing how deeply her words were hurting Zainabu. Slowly, the girl who once loved to smile and talk became quiet and withdrawn. She started to believe that maybe Adana was right. Maybe she wasn't beautiful, and maybe she would never be good enough. One evening, Zainabu's family was invited to a big gathering. It was a celebration, and many people from the village had come. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the delicious smell of food. Zainabu was nervous but excited. She wore her best dress, hoping to enjoy the evening like everyone else. As the guests settled in, Adana stood proudly beside Ifunanya, showing her off to everyone. "Look at my beautiful daughter," she said with a smile. "Her skin is like fresh palm milk. So fair, so smooth. Isn't she lovely?" The guests nodded, admiring Ifunanya's beauty. Then, Adana's eyes landed on Zainabu. Her smile faded, and she let out a small sigh. "And then there's Zainabu," she said carelessly. "So dark, so plain. Who would even notice her?" The room went silent for a moment. Some guests looked at Zainabu with pity, while others whispered among themselves. A few even laughed softly, covering their mouths. Zainabu's heart pounded. She felt like the ground beneath her feet was disappearing. Her hands trembled as she looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight, and her chest ached. The shame was too much to bear. Without thinking, she turned and ran. Pushing past the guests, she rushed outside, her vision blurred with tears. She didn't stop until she was far from the laughter and whispers. She sat under a large tree, hugging her knees, crying softly. Why did Adana hate her so much? Why did her skin make her less worthy in her stepmother's eyes? That night, as she sat alone in the dark, Zainabu felt smaller than ever before. After that terrible night, something inside Zainabu changed. She no longer smiled or laughed as she used to. She stopped playing outside with the other children and spent most of her time alone. When people spoke to her, she answered in a soft, almost lifeless voice. She moved through the days like a shadow, unnoticed and unheard. She began to avoid mirrors. She hated seeing her reflection because it reminded her of Adana's cruel words. Whenever she passed by a shiny surface, she quickly looked away. She wished she could change, wished she could be lighter like Ifunanya, just so Adana would stop looking at her with disgust. At home, Ifunanya continued to be treated like a princess. Adana bought her fine clothes and praised her beauty every day. Zainabu, on the other hand, was given chores to do and was often ignored. The more Adana neglected her, the more Zainabu felt invisible. Her father, though kind and loving, didn't notice how deeply she was hurting. He was always busy with work, and whenever he did see Adana being strict, he thought she was only trying to teach Zainabu discipline. He didn't understand that his daughter was breaking inside. At night, Zainabu lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why she wasn't good enough. She wanted to talk to her father, to tell him everything, but she was afraid. What if he didn't believe her? What if he thought she was just being weak? So, she kept her pain to herself, carrying it like a heavy stone in her heart. Each day she faded a little more, losing the bright, confident girl she used to be. One afternoon, after finishing her chores, Zainabu felt an unbearable heaviness in her heart. She couldn't stay in that house any longer, surrounded by Adana's cruel words and Ifunanya's perfect smiles. So, without thinking, she walked away, her feet leading her far beyond the familiar roads of her village. She didn't know where she was going. She just wanted to escape. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the clouds with orange and pink hues. But Zainabu didn't notice. She was lost in her thoughts, her mind replaying every painful word Adana had ever said. Before she realized it, she had reached the old part of the market, where fewer people went these days. The wooden stalls stood quiet, abandoned after years of use. Weeds grew between the cracks of the stone paths, and the air smelled of dried herbs and aged wood. She sat on a broken wooden bench, wrapping her arms around herself. "Why do you look so sad, my child?" Zainabu flinched, startled by the unexpected voice. She turned and saw an old woman standing a few steps away. The woman's face was lined with wrinkles, but her deep brown skin glowed with warmth. She had kind eyes that seemed to see right into Zainabu's soul. She wore a flowing wrapper of deep blue and gold, and in her hands, she held a small clay pot. Zainabu hesitated, unsure if she should answer. No one had ever asked about her sadness before, but something about this woman felt safe. "I don't know," she whispered, looking away. The old woman walked closer and sat beside her. "Ah, but I do," she said softly. "I see the pain in your eyes. You feel invisible, like the world has forgotten you, like you are not enough." Zainabu's chest tightened. How did this stranger understand what she felt? "You, my dear, are special," the woman continued. "You are destined for greatness, but you do not see it yet." Zainabu blinked, confused. "Greatness," she repeated. "I am just a girl, a dark-skinned girl that no one cares about." The woman chuckled gently. "Who told you that?" she asked. "True beauty is not in the color of your skin, my child. It is in the strength of your heart, the kindness in your soul, and the light in your spirit. You have a beauty that even the brightest skin cannot match." Zainabu felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to believe the woman's words, but years of hurt made it difficult. The woman reached out and placed the small clay pot in Zainabu's hands. It felt warm, as if it held something magical inside. "This is ancient shea butter," she said, "made with love and wisdom passed down from generations of strong women before you. Use it every day, not just on your skin, but in your heart. Speak kindly to yourself. Look in the mirror and see what I see. A girl who is powerful, beautiful, and worthy of love." Zainabu stared at the pot, unsure of what to say. Could something as simple as shea butter really change anything? The old woman smiled and stood up. Remember, my dear, your beauty and strength have always been there. You only need to see it for yourself. Before Zainabu could ask her name, the woman turned and walked away, disappearing into the quiet market. For the first time in a long while, Zainabu felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just hope. It was a tiny spark of belief. Maybe, just maybe, she was more than what Adana said she was. Maybe she could be something greater. That night, Zainabu sat on her bed, holding the small clay pot in her hands. The words of the old woman, Mama Kemi, echoed in her mind. Use it every day, not just on your skin, but in your heart. She slowly opened the lid, and a soft, rich scent filled the air. The shea butter inside was smooth and golden, glowing under the dim light of her lantern. She dipped her fingers into the butter and gently rubbed it onto her arms. It felt warm and soothing, as if it carried the wisdom and love of the women who had made it. As she applied it, she whispered to herself, "I am enough. I am beautiful." The words felt strange at first, but she repeated them anyway. Each morning, Zainabu continued the ritual. She would stand in front of the mirror, something she had avoided for so long, and instead of looking away in shame, she looked at herself with new eyes. At first, it was difficult. The voice of Adana still lingered in her mind, telling her she wasn't good enough. But every time she applied the shea butter, she fought back with kindness. "I'm strong. I am worthy. My skin is beautiful." Slowly, something inside her began to change. She walked with her head a little higher. She smiled more. She spoke with more confidence. She no longer hid in the shadows or let Adana's words break her spirit. People started to notice. The village women, who once overlooked her, now admired her glowing skin and graceful presence. "Zainabu, you look different," they would say. "What is your secret?" But it wasn't just her skin that had changed. It was her heart. Even Ifunanya, who had always been proud of her own beauty, began to see something new in her stepsister. Zainabu no longer looked sad and small. She looked strong, like someone who knew her worth. Adana, too, noticed the difference. She watched in silence as Zainabu walked past her with quiet confidence, no longer shrinking under her gaze. It unsettled her. She had spent so long trying to make the girl feel unworthy. Yet here she was, shining brighter than ever. Zainabu no longer needed anyone's approval. She had found something far more powerful, self-love, and with every passing day, she grew stronger, ready for whatever destiny had in store for her. One afternoon, as Zainabu walked through the market, she saw a large poster hanging on a wooden wall. It announced a beauty contest in the village, an event where young girls would compete to be crowned the fairest of them all. The prize was not just a title, but also a chance to be recognized and celebrated. Zainabu's heart raced as she read it. She had never imagined entering something like this. Beauty contests were for girls like Ifunanya, fair-skinned, admired, and adored. Not for a girl like her, who had spent years being called ugly. She turned away, ready to forget about it. But a familiar voice stopped her. "You should enter." She turned and saw Mama Kemi standing nearby, her wise eyes twinkling with encouragement. "Me?" Zainabu asked in disbelief. "But I am not the kind of girl they are looking for," Mama Kemi chuckled. "And who decides that?" she asked. "True beauty is not about fair skin, my child. It is about confidence, kindness, and self-love. You have grown into a strong, radiant young woman. Show the world who you are." For a moment, doubt crept into Zainabu's heart, but then she thought about how far she had come. She was no longer the girl who hid from mirrors or shrank under Adana's cruel words. She had learned to love herself, to stand tall, and to embrace her beauty. Taking a deep breath, she decided to enter the contest, but in secret. She did not tell Adana or Ifunanya, knowing they would only mock her. Instead, she filled out the entry form and prepared in silence, using Mama Kemi's advice to guide her. The day of the contest arrived, and the village square was filled with excitement. Girls from different families stood on the stage, dressed in their finest clothes. Ifunanya was among them, smiling proudly as Adana cheered for her. Then, when it was Zainabu's turn to step forward, a gasp spread through the crowd. Whispers filled the air. "Isn't that Zainabu? What is she doing here? Even Adana's eyes widened in shock. But Zainabu did not waver. She walked onto the stage with grace, her dark skin glowing under the sunlight. She did not need expensive clothes or heavy jewelry. Her confidence was her crown. She smiled, not because she wanted approval, but because she finally saw herself as beautiful. The judges watched closely, and as the contest went on, it became clear Zainabu was different. She carried herself with strength, wisdom, and a beauty that shone from within. When the final decision was made, the crowd held its breath. The winner is Zainabu. Silence. Then, a wave of applause erupted. People who had once ignored her were now cheering her name. Even Ifunanya stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. Adana's face was pale with disbelief. Zainabu smiled as she accepted the crown, not for the approval of others, but because she had proven something important. True beauty was never about skin color. It was about confidence, self-respect, and knowing your worth. As she looked into the crowd, she saw young, dark-skinned girls watching her with admiration. In that moment, she knew. This victory was bigger than just a contest. It was a message, and her journey was only beginning. Adana sat in the crowd, frozen with shock. She could not believe what she had just heard. Zainabu? The winner. It felt impossible. How could the girl she had insulted and ignored now stand before the whole village, crowned and celebrated? The cheers grew louder, and people gathered around Zainabu, praising her beauty and grace. Women admired her glowing skin, men nodded in respect, and young girls looked up to her with shining eyes. Even the village elders spoke of how she carried herself with dignity and confidence. Adana clenched her hands, feeling something she had never felt before. Regret. All these years, she had treated Zainabu as if she was nothing, making her feel unworthy just because of the color of her skin. Yet now the same girl she had belittled was standing tall, loved and respected by everyone. Ifunanya stood beside her mother, staring at Zainabu in disbelief. She had always been the one people admired, the one Adana praised. But today, all eyes were on Zainabu. As Zainabu stepped down from the stage, Adana hesitated, then slowly walked toward her. For the first time in years, there was no anger or cruelty in her eyes, only guilt. Zainabu, she said softly, her voice almost unsure. I was wrong about you. Zainabu turned to look at her, her expression unreadable. The pain of years of insults and neglect still lingered in her heart. I did not treat you well, Adana admitted. I thought beauty was only about fair skin, but I see now that I was blind. You are beautiful, Zainabu. You always were. For a long moment, Zainabu said nothing. The little girl who once longed for Adana's approval was gone. She no longer needed her stepmother's words to know her worth. I hope you can forgive me, Adana whispered. Zainabu sighed, her heart heavy. Forgiveness was not easy. The wounds Adana had left ran deep, but she had learned something important. She was not defined by Adana's past cruelty. I will need time, Zainabu said finally, but I will not let your words hurt me anymore. Adana nodded, tears in her eyes. She had lost something precious, Zainabu's trust, and now she could only hope that one day she could truly make things right. After the contest, everything in the village changed, especially in Zainabu's home. Ifunanya, who had always been the center of attention, found herself standing in the background. She had grown up believing that beauty was only about fair skin, that she was special because of it. But now, she saw something different. Zainabu had no fancy clothes, no special treatment, yet she had won the hearts of the people. She walked with confidence, kindness, and grace. People respected her, not just for her beauty, but for her strength. At first, Ifunanya felt jealous. She had always been the favorite, the one her mother praised. But as the days passed, she started watching Zainabu closely. She saw how she treated others with kindness, how she helped the village children, how she spoke with wisdom beyond her years. One evening, as Zainabu sat outside watching the sunset, Ifunanya hesitated before joining her. You looked beautiful at the contest, she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. Zainabu turned to her stepsister, surprised. Ifunanya had never complimented her before. I always thought I was better than you, Ifunanya continued. Because Mama said I was. But I was wrong. She looked down at her hands. You are strong, Zainabu. You didn't let anyone break you. Zainabu smiled softly. She had never hated Ifunanya, even when she was cruel. She understood now that Ifunanya had been shaped by Adana's words, just as she had. True beauty is not just about how we look, Zainabu said. It's about how we treat others, how we love ourselves. Ifunanya nodded, realizing that for the first time, she truly admired her stepsister. Inside the house, Adana sat alone, deep in thought. She had spent years chasing an idea of beauty that had blinded her. She had believed that fair skin made a woman more valuable, but now she saw how wrong she had been. Her own daughter had grown spoiled and proud because of her words, and she had pushed Zainabu away with cruelty. Looking at her reflection in the small mirror, Adana saw not just her own face, but the pain she had caused. She had been so focused on beauty that she had ignored kindness, strength, and love. The things that truly mattered. For the first time in her life, Adana felt ashamed. She knew she could not erase the past, but she could learn from it. And maybe, if she tried hard enough, she could become a better person. With time, Zainabu found peace in her heart. She had grown into a strong and confident young woman, no longer seeking approval from those who once doubted her worth. But one thing remained, Adana's apology. One evening, as the cool breeze filled the air, Adana approached Zainabu with careful steps. I know I hurt you, she said, her voice full of regret, and I don't expect you to forget the past. But I am truly sorry. Zainabu looked at her stepmother, seeing the pain in her eyes. She had waited years to hear these words. Forgiveness was not easy, but she had learned that holding on to anger would only weigh her down. I forgive you, Adana, Zainabu said gently, but things cannot go back to how they were. I will not allow anyone to make me feel small again. Adana nodded, understanding that Zainabu had changed. She was no longer the quiet girl who accepted mistreatment. She had set boundaries, and Adana knew she had to respect them. But Zainabu's journey did not end there. After winning the beauty contest, she used her voice to inspire other dark-skinned girls in the village. She spoke to them about self-love, confidence, and the power of embracing who they were. Many young girls who had once felt invisible began to walk with their heads high, no longer ashamed of their skin. Mothers started teaching their daughters that beauty was not about fairness, but about strength and kindness. Zainabu had not only changed her own life, she had changed the lives of many. And as she stood before a crowd of young girls, speaking with pride and wisdom, she knew this was her true purpose. She had become more than just a girl with dark skin. She was a symbol of strength, beauty, and self-love, and no one could take that away from her ever again.